It was one of those afternoons when the house felt larger than life itself, with sunlight pouring through the living room windows, casting long golden streaks across the hardwood floors. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound accompanying me as I folded laundry on the couch, my fingers moving instinctively, the rhythm of the task so familiar that it required little thought. Yet, my mind was anything but calm. I couldn't remember the last time Greg had kissed me with a genuine, breathtaking kiss that left me yearning for more, rather than the fleeting peck he offered before rushing off to work. Though years had passed, the ache of missing that intimacy lingered. My husband had become a stranger within our own home, consumed by endless meetings, emails, and the glow of his phone screen. His absence wasn't physical, but it felt profoundly real. Catching my reflection in the window, the late afternoon sun illuminated the fine lines forming around my eyes. At 33, I was neither old nor the carefree girl I once saw staring back at me. My hand instinctively smoothed the strap of my camisole, the lace catching on my skin, the fabric clinging in a way that felt both comforting and tantalizing. For a moment, I let myself wonder when someone had last truly noticed me. Then there was Nathan. He'd been staying with us for a few months since graduating college, back to save money while job hunting. At 22, he was everything Greg once was: vibrant, full of life, and effortlessly confident. His presence initially underscored the growing distance between my husband and me, but lately it had morphed into something entirely different. I noticed how his laughter filled the house, how his eyes sparkled when he spoke of his future plans, and though I tried to ignore it, I noticed how his t-shirts hugged his chest, how his cologne lingered faintly in the air after he passed by. It was wrong to think of him this way. I knew it. But the heart doesn't obey the rules of right and wrong. The sound of footsteps broke my reverie. Nathan was in the kitchen, rummaging through the refrigerator, the clink of glass bottles and the soft shuffle of his bare feet on the tile echoing through the house. The air suddenly felt warmer, heavier, as if his mere presence altered the atmosphere. "Nathan," I called, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He appeared in the doorway moments later, his tall frame silhouetted by the kitchen light, dressed in a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd just woken from a nap. "Could you help me with something?" "Sure," he replied easily, stepping into the room, his casual confidence only intensifying the pull I felt toward him. I turned away, fumbling with the bra clasp beneath my camisole. "The strap keeps slipping," I explained, my voice softening to a whisper. "Could you tighten it for me?" A pause hung in the air, a hesitation like the final note of a song about to fade. Then I heard him move closer. My breath caught as his hands brushed my shoulders, his fingers grazing the thin strap as he adjusted it. His touch was firm yet careful, deliberate, sending shivers down my spine. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice low, almost a murmur. "Yes," I replied, barely audible. The room felt impossibly small, the space between us shrinking with each second. His fingers lingered a moment too long, and I felt the warmth of his breath on the back of my neck. It was intoxicating. How something so simple could reignite a spark that had been smoldering within me for so long. As he stepped back, I turned to face him, my hands instinctively reaching to adjust the strap, though it was already perfect. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw something in his gaze that mirrored my own feelings. An unspoken tension, a question neither of us dared voice. "Thanks," I said, breaking the silence, but my tone lacked the casualness I intended. "No problem," he replied, his voice equally subdued, yet he didn't move. His gaze flicked briefly to the neckline of my camisole before returning to mine. The moment stretched. Heavy with unspoken words neither of us had the courage or recklessness to say. Then, as if the universe itself intervened, his phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping us back to reality. He reached for it, muttering something about needing to take a call, and left the room. I stood there long after he was gone, my heart pounding, my mind replaying every detail of what had just happened. It must have been innocent, but the way my skin tingled where he'd touched me, the way my body hummed with an energy I hadn't felt in years, told a different story. Later that evening, as I lay alone in bed, The memory of his touch lingered. I tried to close my eyes and push the thoughts away, but they persisted. Deep down, beneath layers of guilt and doubt, a question began to form. If something so small could feel so powerful, what would happen if we stopped pretending it didn't exist? The house had always been quiet, but now it seemed alive with possibilities, each moment heavy with the weight of what might come next. That afternoon, the house was unusually still, every creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator amplified. I stood in my bedroom before the mirror, struggling with the strap of my favorite black bra. It had always been temperamental, slipping just enough to remind me of its imperfection, much like so many things in my life. Today, it was especially stubborn. I tugged at it, twisting my arm awkwardly behind my back, but the clasp refused to budge. My reflection stared back, issuing an unspoken challenge in my own eyes. Ask for help. It wasn't something I did often. Greg was rarely home, and I'd almost forgotten how to ask for assistance. But today felt different. The loneliness weighed heavier, like a shadow stretching too far, swallowing the light. Then I heard Nathan's footsteps down the hall, the familiar shuffle of his sneakers on the carpet. Without thinking, I called out, "Nathan?" The footsteps paused, then drew closer. "Yeah?" His voice was casual, unconcerned, but there was a warmth to it I hadn't noticed before. "I need a favor," I said, turning toward the doorway as he appeared. He leaned against the frame, one hand resting on the edge, his broad shoulders filling the space. His t-shirt clung to him in a way that felt intentional, though I knew it wasn't. Just Nathan, relaxed, confident, effortlessly present. "What's up?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly as his eyes met mine. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat, but pressed on, keeping my tone light. "This strap," I said, gesturing to my shoulder. "It's driving me crazy. Can you fix it for me?" The request hung between us like an invisible thread, taut with tension. His expression shifted slightly, his brows rising in surprise before settling into something unreadable. Sure," he said, stepping into the room. I turned my back to him, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The way the afternoon light caught the curve of my neck, the faint scent of his cologne as he drew closer, the sound of his breathing, steady but just a touch heavier. My skin tingled as his hands brushed my shoulder, his fingers tentative at first, then more certain as he worked the clasp. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice softening to a whisper. "Yes," I replied, barely audible. The air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. His fingers were warm, his touch careful yet firm, as if balancing on the edge of something fragile. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the sensation wash over me. A simple touch, but it felt like a lifeline. "There," he said after a moment, stepping back slightly. "I think that should do it." I turned to face him, my hand instinctively adjusting the strap again, though it didn't need it. Our eyes met, and for a split second, everything else faded. The room, the light, the quiet hum of the house. There was only the intensity in his gaze, a look that saw through the walls I'd built around myself. "Thanks," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "No problem," he replied, but he didn't move. His eyes flickered briefly to the strap before returning to mine. The moment stretched, heavy and electric, until his phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the spell. He fumbled for it, muttering an apology as he glanced at the screen. "I'll take this," he said, backing toward the door, but his gaze lingered as if he didn't want to leave. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing the now perfect strap, but it wasn't the strap I was thinking about. It was the way his hands had felt on my skin, the way his eyes had seen me. Not just as his stepmother, but as a woman. The thought lingered, unwelcome but impossible to dismiss. It wasn't just about Nathan. It was about me, about the parts of myself I'd buried. As I lay in bed that night, I replayed the moment, every detail vivid. The hesitation in his fingers, the softening of his voice, the lingering look in his eyes. I knew I should feel guilty and push the thoughts away. but I didn't. The days following that moment stretched endlessly, as if time itself had slowed, forcing me to confront thoughts I didn't want to admit. I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry, wiping countertops, watering the plants on the back porch. But the memory of Nathan's touch lingered like a faint trace of perfume, subtle yet inescapable. When I saw him next, it was late afternoon. Sunlight streaming through the living room windows, casting golden streaks across the floor. I sat curled on the couch, a book open in my lap, though I wasn't reading. My eyes scanned the words, but my mind was elsewhere. I heard him in the kitchen, the clink of glasses, the low hum of a podcast he was half listening to. "Hey," he said, appearing in the doorway with a glass of iced tea, hesitating before stepping into the room. His presence filled the space, making the air feel heavier. "You look comfortable," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. I glanced down at myself, bare feet tucked beneath me, an oversized sweater draped loosely over my shoulders. I didn't feel comfortable, but vulnerable, exposed. "It's a good day for being lazy," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though my heart pounded. He laughed softly, a low, warm sound that stirred something deep within me. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the opposite end of the couch. "Of course not," I said, the words too quick, too eager. I shifted slightly, making room as he settled in, the cushion sinking under his weight. He stretched out, his long legs brushing mine, sending a shiver up my spine I hoped he didn't notice. We sat in silence, the only sound the rustle of pages as I pretended to read. The tension between us was palpable, an invisible thread pulling tighter. I felt his gaze on me, not constant, but lingering, as if he were trying to puzzle something out. "Claire," he said abruptly, his voice softer, almost hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I replied, but the word caught in my throat. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair nervously. "The other day, when I helped with your strap, was that weird for you?" The question hung heavy, loaded. My cheeks flushed, heat rising as I searched for words. "No," I said finally, softer than intended. "It wasn't weird, just unexpected." "Yeah," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Unexpected." He repeated the word as if testing its weight. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The room felt too quiet, the distance between us both vast and non-existent. Then, as if drawn by some force, he shifted closer, his knee brushing mine again, this time deliberately. "Claire," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes searching mine. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in them, a longing that mirrored my own. I closed my book slowly, setting it aside, my hand lingering over the cushion before resting close to his leg. His breath caught slightly, and I realized how close we were, how the smallest movement could bridge the gap. "Nathan," I said softly, my voice trembling but steady enough to break the silence. Before I could say more, the front door opened and Greg's cheerful voice echoed through the house. "I'm home," Nathan pulled back as if burned, his expression shifting to practiced neutrality. I grabbed my book, flipping it open, though the words blurred. Greg entered, his smile wide and oblivious. "Hey, you two," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "What's going on?" "Nothing much," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just relaxing." Nathan's hands fidgeted against his thighs, grounding himself. Greg kissed my forehead absently before heading to the kitchen, leaving us alone again. Neither of us moved, the weight of what had almost happened pressing down. Nathan stood abruptly, leaving the room. I remained, gripping the book tightly, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced. The memory of his gaze and touch burned into my skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not even close. What began as a quiet moment had grown far more complicated, and the thought of what might happen next was as thrilling as it was terrifying. The storm within me had been building for days, if not weeks, and tonight it felt ready to burst. The house was cloaked in an odd stillness, the kind that precedes change. A sudden power outage left the rooms bathed in flickering candlelight, shadows dancing on the walls like silent witnesses to my inner turmoil. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a deck of cards spread before me, playing solitaire by candlelight, an act of desperation to keep my hands and mind occupied. It wasn't working. My thoughts kept drifting to Nathan's fleeting touch earlier that day, a brush of his hand that left heat in its wake. He was in the kitchen now, rummaging for a drink, the clink of bottles faint but distinct. "Thanks," I said quietly, avoiding his gaze, focusing on the flickering candle nearest me. But I felt him watching, his presence as tangible as the humid air clinging to my skin. "You're welcome," he replied, his tone subdued, leaning back on his hands, legs stretched out. The movement was casual, but my eyes betrayed me, catching the way his t-shirt rode up, revealing a sliver of sun-kissed skin above his waistband. I forced myself to look away, but the image lingered. "Power outages always feel so strange," I said, filling the silence. "Like the world just stops for a while." "Yeah," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "Everything feels different when it's quiet like this." His words carried weight, heavy with unspoken meaning. I shuffled the cards absent-mindedly, the sound filling the void. Nathan reached for a card, flipping it over and placing it down carefully. "Solitaire?" he asked, a faint smile forming. "Just passing the time," I said, returning a tentative smile. He leaned closer, the faint warmth of his body and his clean, woodsy scent washing over me. I fought the urge to close my eyes and let it envelop me. The air thickened, the candles flickering shadows almost conspiratorial. Nathan fidgeted with the card, his voice trailing off. "Do you ever feel like—" The question caught me off guard, its simplicity masking its gravity. I met his gaze, my heart pounding. His eyes searched for an answer I wasn't sure I could give. "I think change is inevitable," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "Even when we're not ready for it." He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Yeah, that makes sense." The space between us felt impossibly small, charged with an energy I couldn't name. My pulse quickened as his hand moved closer to mine, a small gesture that felt deliberate. "Claire," he said quietly, my name sending shivers down my spine. I couldn't respond, my throat tight. Thoughts tangled with fear and longing. Then his fingers brushed mine, sending a jolt through me. I froze, my breath catching but didn't pull away. The candles flickered wildly, their flames twisting as if caught in the same storm raging inside me. Nathan's hand stayed, his touch light but intentional, his gaze searching for permission or absolution. "It's okay," he said softly. "If you don't want—" I wanted it in a way that terrified me, my skin tingling, heart racing. I couldn't speak, so I reached for him, my fingers curling around his. A silent answer to his unspoken question. A distant thunderclap echoed, reminding us of the storm outside. Nathan pulled back slightly, his expression shifting to quiet understanding. "We should probably check the candles," he said, his voice steadier, though his eyes betrayed his turmoil. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "We should." As he gathered the candles, I stayed on the floor, my fingers tingling from his touch, knowing this was far from over. The storm had passed for now, but its aftermath was just beginning. The night had been quiet, but the echoes of what happened were anything but. Something had shifted, something irreversible. Deep down, I knew the true storm was still waiting to break. The house was dark, save for the faint glow of the television, casting shifting patterns across the walls. The movie played, its dialogue barely registering as background noise. I couldn't recall its title or plot. Nathan had been unusually quiet since dinner, his easygoing demeanor replaced by attention mirroring my own. I stole a glance, tracing the lines of his profile. The sharp jaw, the curve of his lips caught in the flickering light. He seemed lost in thought, eyes fixed on the screen but unfocused, as if elsewhere. "I can change the movie if you're bored," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, his expression softening. No, it's fine. I'm just distracted. By what? I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. My breath caught as his gaze lingered too long, that unspoken tension binding us in ways I couldn't fully grasp but couldn't deny. He hesitated, weighing his words. Nothing important, he said, but his expression told a different story. I leaned back, fingers curling around the blanket on my lap. The room felt warmer, the air thick. My heart pounded, and I hated how obvious it felt, as if he could sense it. Nathan moved closer, my pulse quickening, the tension crackling like static. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as a wife or stepmother, but as a woman. Claire, he said quietly, my name sending shivers down my spine. I turned to him, heart racing, his expression unreadable, eyes searching for something I couldn't name. The movie faded into the background, replaced by the rhythm of my breathing and the thud of my heartbeat. What is it? I asked, my voice barely audible. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, he said carefully, but I can't stop thinking about... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. The weight of his words and silence was palpable. My mind raced, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't untangle. I knew I should stop this, but I couldn't move or speak, only wait. Nathan, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't... We shouldn't. I know. He replied quickly. I know we shouldn't, but that doesn't change how I feel. His confession hit like a wave, pulling me under. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet wanted to dive into the intensity. His gaze met mine, reflecting the same conflict. Fear, desire, guilt, and something close to hope. He reached for my hand, his touch light yet deliberate. My breath caught as his fingers brushed mine, the warmth sending a shock through me. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I let him take my hand, his grip firm but gentle, as if I might vanish. I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice barely audible. But I can't pretend this isn't real. His words hung heavy, undeniable. My mind screamed to stop, but my body leaned into his touch, craving a connection I hadn't felt in years. The distance between us vanished as he leaned closer, his face inches from mine. His breath was warm, his scent intoxicating. My heart pounded, but he didn't back away. He tilted his head, his gaze locked on mine, and time seemed to stop. Nathan, I whispered, holding his gaze despite my trembling voice. He didn't respond, but his eyes said everything. He leaned in slowly, his lips brushing mine in a tentative kiss, as if waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. I closed my eyes, losing myself in the warmth of his touch, the way his hand cupped my face so gently it made my heart ache. The kiss deepened, bold and certain, and something within me broke free. A dam holding back years of longing, frustration, and loneliness. My hands gripped his shoulders as if he were my only anchor. The world faded, leaving only us and the electricity between us. But as quickly as it began, it ended. Nathan pulled back, his breathing ragged, eyes searching mine with fear and desire. We can't, he said quietly. I don't want to hurt you, or him. I nodded, my breath shaky. I know, I said, though the words felt hollow. The weight of what had happened pressed down, and I knew there was no turning back. The line had been crossed, the consequences looming just beyond the horizon. The silence that followed was deafening, full of everything we couldn't say. As I sat there, heart racing, I wondered what would happen next and if we'd survive it. I sat at the edge of my bed, the quiet of the house pressing in like a weight I couldn't shake. The previous night played on a relentless loop in my mind, each moment sharper than the last. The warmth of Nathan's hand, the taste of his kiss, the regret and danger in his eyes as he pulled back. Footsteps in the hallway made my heart skip, and I straightened, smoothing my shirt's hem as if it could erase what had happened. The door creaked open, and there was Nathan, his expression carefully blank, though his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. "Morning," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Morning," I replied, my voice too high, too quick. I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. For a moment, neither of us moved, the silence thick with everything unsaid. Then he stepped into the room, closing the door with a soft click. "Claire," he said, his tone hesitant, as if unsure where to begin. "We need to talk." "I know," I said quickly, gripping the bed's edge, "but I don't know what there is to say." "There's plenty to say," he replied, his voice firm but not harsh. He stepped closer, then another step until he stood before me. "Last night, it can't happen again." I nodded, the words like a dagger. "I know. But knowing doesn't make it easier," he said, his expression softening. "It doesn't change how I feel." My breath caught, and I looked up, my heart pounding. "Nathan, we can't do this. It's wrong. It's complicated." "Everything worth feeling is complicated," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He reached out, brushing his hand against mine in a touch that could have been accidental but wasn't. "But I can't pretend this isn't real." I closed my eyes, his words cutting through me. He was right. It was real. Terrifyingly so, but real didn't make it right or safe. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice trembling. "If Greg finds out—" "He's too preoccupied with work to notice anything," Nathan interrupted, his tone sharp. "That doesn't make it okay," I shot back, frustrated. "You're his son." "Stepson," he corrected, his voice tight. "And I'm an adult. So are you." His words hung in the air, the room feeling impossibly small. I turned away, hands trembling as I gripped the chair by the window. The sunlight felt cruel, too bright, too exposing. "This isn't just about us," I said, barely audible. "It's about everything else. Greg, this house, our lives. It's about what we want," he countered softly. "And maybe what we deserve." I turned to face him, my heart aching under his words' weight. His eyes searched mine, reflecting the same conflict tearing me apart. Guilt, desire, fear. He stepped closer, and I stayed still. "Claire," he whispered, my name sending a shiver through me. "Tell me you don't feel it. Tell me you don't want this." I opened my mouth, but no words came. I couldn't lie. Not to him, not to myself. His hand reached out, gently cupping my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin. I leaned into his touch, craving the connection I'd denied for so long. "I can't do this," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you can," he said softly. "We both can." Before I could respond, a car door slammed outside, shattering the moment. My heart leapt, and I pulled away, panic surging. "It's Greg," I said, my voice urgent. Nathan stepped back, his expression a mix of frustration and resignation. "We'll talk later," he said firmly. I nodded, my mind racing as I moved to the door, gripping the doorknob like an anchor. I heard the front door open, Greg's cheerful voice calling out, "Hey, honey." I smiled, stepping into the hallway, away from the storm still raging behind me. But even as I greeted him, my heart was back in that room with Nathan, with the choices we had yet to make. The quiet moments ahead would be a prelude to the chaos waiting to unfold, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a story that wouldn't end here.